The first thing I notice every morning isn't my husband's side of the bed going cold, it's the soft hum drifting over the hedge from the house next door. Two parallel driveways, two small porches with the same squeaky step, two private houses pressed into a neat suburban row like matching keys on a piano. His espresso machine starts before sunrise, a low purr followed by the tap-tap of a portafilter. It's ridiculous that I've come to rely on a stranger's routine more than my husband's, but here we are. Mark leaves at 6:10, careful kiss on my temple, wedding ring cool against my cheek, the kind of affection that feels like a receipt, proof of purchase, filed away. By 6:12 the neighborhood goes quiet, sprinklers whispering, a bark 2 streets over, a delivery van sighing, and that's when it happens, the warm, steady exhale of his kitchen. I stand at my window with my own mug, facing our narrow side yard where the hedges almost touch, and I tell myself I'm watching the weather. The truth is smaller and stranger. I'm listening to a sound that makes my house feel less empty. I saw him properly for the first time last month, when the wind tore the bin lids off like someone had flipped a coin and lost patience. I was in Mark's oversized hoodie and socks that collected every leaf. He was in a faded college t-shirt, hair uncombed, smiling in that unbothered way people do when they're still half in a dream. "Morning, neighbor," he called, and I pretended not to like the word. Neighbor. It slid under my skin and settled there. He told me once, through the hedge, voices carrying on a weekday, that his wife works nights at the hospital. I nodded, said something polite about schedules, then went inside and stood in the hallway longer than necessary, hand resting on the quiet thud in my chest. Mark works days that stretch like rubber bands. Lately, every conversation snaps back to budgets, to-do lists, deliveries arriving while I'm out. We live in a pair of tidy boxes with matching lawns and a long, shared silence between them. This morning, the hum starts earlier. I open the window an inch and the cold slips in, clean and bright. I picture his kitchen laid out like mine, sink under the window, a thin strip of sunlight on tile, a single chair pulled slightly away from the table. It's strange how identical houses can hold such different weather. I've never been inside his, but the shape is familiar. Our floor plans are mirror images, like two people saying the same sentence with different meanings. My phone lights up. Mark. Got the email? We'll talk tonight. I type a heart, then delete it, then send it anyway. When I look up, a shadow moves behind the frosted glass of his side door. The handle turns. He steps onto his porch with a white mug and bare feet, and something about the unguardedness of it, his shoulders, his easy posture, makes the morning feel more intimate than it should. He glances over the hedge as if he can feel me thinking about him. I freeze. He can't see me, not really, the angle protects me like a secret. Still, I ease the window down until only a thin seam of sound remains. I don't know his name yet, which helps. Names make people real, and real is dangerous. For now, he is the hum through the hedge, the steam curling over a fence line, the echo of an identical house breathing the same hour I am. I wrap both hands around my mug and tell myself I'm only waiting for the sun to warm the porch. I tell myself the day will fill in like always, emails, errands, the ritual of being good at a life that looks good from the street. But the truth is simpler. I'm listening for the click of his cup on the railing and the soft sigh he makes before the first sip, the quiet proof that someone on the other side of our neat little border is awake with me. And when it comes, a small ceramic note in the morning's music, I close my eyes and let the sound land exactly where my husband's careful kiss did not. The next morning, I linger by the window longer than I should. The frost on the glass softens the view, turns everything outside into a painting, quiet, hazy, almost innocent. But I can still see him. Daniel. I finally learned his name yesterday when a package meant for him showed up on our porch. I'd promised myself I wouldn't look at the label, but of course I did. He's in his yard, wearing a gray hoodie, leaning over his small garden bed like he's trying to fix the earth itself. There's something about watching a man do ordinary things slowly, rolling his sleeves, brushing dirt from his fingers, that feels too intimate. My husband never moves like that anymore. He's always rushing somewhere, eyes on his phone, voice clipped and practical. I step outside with my own mug of coffee. The air smells like wet leaves and cold metal. Daniel looks up when he hears the gate creak. "Morning again," he says. "Morning," I answer, smiling before I can stop myself. We talk about nothing, weather, renovations, the dog 2 houses over that never stops barking. But there's a warmth under every word, like a secret current neither of us dares to name. The fence between us feels smaller than it did yesterday. When he laughs, he rests his arm casually on the wooden top, and I notice the faint scar running along his wrist. I want to ask where it came from, but I don't. Instead, I trace the rim of my mug with my finger and let the silence hang there, sweet and heavy. My phone buzzes in my pocket, a message from Mark: "Meeting got extended. Don't wait for me." Daniel notices my change of expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I say. "Just work." He nods, takes a slow sip of coffee, eyes lingering a little too long. Then he says softly, "You ever get tired of the quiet around here?" I should have laughed it off. I should have said something safe. But I didn't. Instead, I met his gaze, felt that thin thread of electricity pull between us, and said, "Every day." He smiled, not the kind you give a neighbor, but the kind that says, "I understand exactly what you mean." When I went back inside, my hands were shaking slightly, though I wasn't cold. The hum of his coffee machine followed me through the walls, steady and familiar, and I realized something dangerous. I was starting to wait for it. That Friday morning, the world felt slower, softer somehow, like the air itself was waiting. I'd woken up before Mark's alarm, lying there in the dim half-light, listening to him button his shirt and clear his throat the way he always does when he's about to leave. He kissed my forehead, a practiced, absent gesture, and said, "Don't forget the groceries." I nodded, eyes closed, pretending to be half asleep. The front door clicked shut, and silence filled the house again. Only it wasn't real silence. Through the wall, faint and steady, came the hum I now knew by heart: Daniel's coffee machine. The sound threaded through the quiet like a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. By the time I'd poured my own cup, there was a knock at the back gate. 3 light taps. I froze. Then, through the kitchen window, I saw him, standing there in his worn hoodie, holding a thermos and a shy smile. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said when I opened the door. "I made too much coffee. Thought you might help me fix that." It was harmless. Completely harmless. At least, that's what I told myself when I invited him to the patio. We sat outside, 2 mugs steaming between us, the sun still hiding behind the trees. The conversation moved easily, too easily. He told me about growing up near the coast, about how he and his wife had met in college. I nodded, laughed where I should, and said little about myself. But he noticed things. The chipped nail polish, the dent in my wedding ring, the way I glanced toward the road every time a car passed, expecting to see marks. At one point, a gust of wind lifted a strand of hair across my face. Before I could brush it away, Daniel reached over, not a full touch, just his fingers grazing the air near my cheek, and tucked it behind my ear. My breath caught. It was so small, that moment, yet it felt like the world tilted a few degrees off its axis. "Thanks," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't thank someone for noticing you." The words sank deep, too deep. We both looked away, pretending the pause was casual. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated. "You know," he said quietly, "you can come over sometime. I've been fixing up the patio, could use another opinion." I laughed it off, but something in me stirred, curiosity, maybe, or hunger. After he left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the fence that separated our 2 houses. It used to feel like a boundary. Now, it felt like an invitation. It rained that Tuesday, not the dramatic kind of rain that rattles the roof, but the slow, steady kind that turns everything silver and soft. Mark had already left for a 2-day business trip. He texted me from the highway, "Stay warm. Love you." I stared at the message longer than I should have, realizing that I couldn't remember the last time those words made my chest ache the way they used to. By mid-morning the house felt too quiet. The sound of rain on the patio was hypnotic, almost heavy. I was half reading a book when I heard it, 2 quick knocks at the back door. My pulse jumped. Through the fogged glass, Daniel's shape appeared, umbrella in one hand, the other holding a folded towel. His hoodie was soaked through, darkened with rain. "Your gutter's overflowing," he said when I opened the door. "Thought I'd warn you before it floods your steps." He looked like a man caught between doing a favor and crossing a line. "Come in," I said before I could think. "You're drenched." Inside, the air felt warmer, too close. He toed off his shoes by the mat, rain dripping from his sleeves. I fetched him one of Mark's old sweatshirts, the navy one that had lost its shape. When he pulled it over his head, something in my stomach twisted, maybe guilt, maybe something that felt worse. "Thanks," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Guess I wasn't built for storms." I smiled faintly. "You fix everything else though." He looked at me, eyes steady, voice lower. "Not everything." The words hung there. Between us, the rain thickened against the windows like static. I made coffee, pretending it was routine. He stood beside me at the counter, close enough that I could feel the warmth from his arm. The smell of espresso filled the room, the same one I used to hear through the hedge, but now it surrounded me completely. When I turned to hand him the cup, our fingers brushed. It was such a small touch, but it didn't feel small. It felt deliberate, a test neither of us wanted to fail. "I should go," he murmured. "You don't have to," I said, just as quietly. He didn't move for a moment. The rain softened outside, almost as if it was listening. Then he smiled, slow, uncertain, and stepped back. "I'll check the gutter later," he said, and left. When the door closed, I stood there, heart unsteady, the smell of coffee still in the air, Mark's sweatshirt gone from the hook, and the echo of Daniel's voice replaying like a song I wasn't supposed to like. That night, I realized something I hadn't before: the distance between our houses wasn't measured in meters anymore. It was measured in how long I could stand the quiet before wanting to hear his knock again. The rain stopped the next morning, but the world still smelled like it, clean, metallic, and a little sad. Sunlight came through the curtains in soft lines, lighting up the empty side of the bed where Mark's pillow lay untouched. He'd texted again at dawn, "Long day ahead. Don't wait up." I didn't. Instead, I found myself standing by the kitchen window, staring toward Daniel's house. The distance between our porches was small, just a narrow strip of grass, a white fence, and a space filled with everything we hadn't said yet. His curtains were open. I could see him moving inside, bare feet on wood, towel slung around his neck, hair still damp from a shower. He looked up for a second, as if sensing me, and our eyes met through the glass. Neither of us moved. It should have felt awkward, two neighbors caught in a quiet moment that lasted too long, but it didn't. It felt like acknowledgement. Like both of us finally stopped pretending this was nothing. He smiled, small and crooked, and lifted his mug as if to say morning. I did the same. That invisible exchange carried more warmth than any word Mark had said to me in weeks. I hated how easily it made me feel alive. Later that day, while watering the small garden by the porch, I heard the creak of his gate. Daniel leaned against the fence, holding a handful of wildflowers. "For your garden," he said, passing them over the slats. "Thought it looked a little lonely." I laughed softly. "Are you saying my plants need company?" He tilted his head. "Maybe their owner does." I froze, not from offense, but from how much truth hid in that sentence. I took the flowers. Our fingers brushed again, longer this time, slower. No excuses left. No polite laughter. Just that touch, the kind that makes the air thinner and time stretch out. A car passed, breaking the silence, and we both stepped back, as if the world had caught us doing something dangerous. "Thanks for the flowers," I said quietly. "Anytime," he replied, voice lower now. "You can always knock if you need more." When he left, I stood there holding the flowers, heart loud in my chest, realizing I'd already crossed something, not a line, but a point of no return. That night, when Mark called from his hotel room, I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was distant, wrapped in the static of another city. He asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. But as I hung up, my eyes drifted to the faint glow through Daniel's window. 2 houses. 2 lights still on. And a silence that didn't feel empty anymore. It happened on one of those 2 warm afternoons that pretend to be summer even though the calendar says spring. Mark was still out of town, and I was supposed to meet a friend for lunch, but I'd cancelled with an excuse I didn't believe myself. I told her I wasn't feeling well. The truth was, I didn't want to talk to anyone who couldn't feel what was happening inside my chest, that strange, steady pull toward the house next door. I was in the yard, trimming the small rose bush by the fence, when Daniel's voice came over, low and easy. "Careful, those thorns bite." I looked up. He was leaning over the top slat, sleeves rolled up, a light sheen of sweat on his forearms. He'd been working on something, his patio maybe, a hammer still dangling from one hand. "Maybe I like a little danger," I said before realizing how it sounded. He laughed softly. "Do you?" It was one of those moments where the air shifts, where everything that was playful turns quiet. He set the hammer down, eyes on me now. "Want to see how it's coming along?" he asked. I hesitated for maybe a second too long, long enough to know I was already saying yes. Inside his house, the air smelled of paint, cedar, and coffee. The rooms mirrored mine, but everything felt different, warmer, more lived in. On the table sat 2 mismatched mugs, one still half full. He showed me the patio he'd rebuilt, smooth wood, still damp from varnish. "It's not finished yet," he said, "but I wanted someone to see it before I ruin it with furniture." "It's beautiful," I said, meaning more than just the patio. We stood there, sunlight spilling through the glass doors, dust floating like slow snow. He turned toward me, close enough that I could see the small scar on his lip, the one I'd noticed before but never this near. "I keep thinking," he said quietly, "how strange it is, living this close to someone and not knowing what their laugh sounds like." I smiled, but my throat tightened. "Then maybe you should fix that." He chuckled, a real, unguarded sound, and it did something to me. My heart slowed and raced at the same time. Then he reached out, brushing a fleck of sawdust from my arm. His touch lingered, just enough to feel real. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. The space between us disappeared, not with a kiss, not yet, but with a stillness that said everything. The sound of a lawnmower from 2 houses away snapped the spell. I stepped back. "I should go," I murmured, though neither of us moved. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah," he said. "But you won't." And he was right. When I finally walked back across the yard, the fence between us looked different, smaller, softer, almost like it wanted to let me through. The weather turned strange that evening, clouds stacked like bruises over the neighborhood, air heavy with that metallic smell before rain. I'd left the kitchen window open, half hoping to hear the low rumble of thunder, half hoping to hear his voice through the yard. By 7, the sky cracked open. Rain hit the porch roof in slow, thick drops that grew faster until it was a curtain of sound. Mark had called an hour earlier to say his meeting ran late. "I'll drive back tomorrow," he said. "Don't wait up." I didn't. A knock came, faint but distinct, on the side door. 3 short taps. My pulse knew the rhythm before my mind did. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there, soaked to the bone, rain streaking down his face. "Power's out on my side," he said. "Thought I'd check if yours is okay." The lights flickered once, then died, as if the world itself wanted to prove his point. "Well," I said, trying to steady my voice, "guess not." He laughed, soft, breathless. "Mind if I wait till it passes?" I nodded. "Of course." He stepped inside, water pooling on the tile. I grabbed a towel, the same one he'd used last week, and handed it to him. Our fingers brushed, again, that electric, invisible spark. It's really coming down, he said, glancing toward the window. Yeah, I whispered. It always rains when it shouldn't. For a while we stood there in the dim half-light, the room lit only by the occasional flash from outside. Every time the lightning flared, I could see the sharp outline of his face, his jaw, the droplets on his hair. Every flash was a photograph I wasn't supposed to keep. Coffee? I asked. My voice came out softer than I meant. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. When I reached for the mugs, my hand trembled slightly. He noticed. His fingers came up, brushed the back of my wrist, a touch meant to steady me, but it only made the air thinner. Cold? He asked. No, I said, though it wasn't true. I was burning inside. Thunder rolled close, and the house seemed to exhale. We stood inches apart, breath mingling, both pretending to be listening to the storm. But there was another sound between us, something quieter, more dangerous, the silence of two people who've already made a choice they haven't yet spoken aloud. Then the lights blinked back on. He exhaled, half a laugh, half a sigh. Looks like the storm's moving on. Yeah, I said, though I knew it wasn't. He left a few minutes later, his towel draped over one shoulder, his hoodie clinging damp to his skin. When the door closed, I leaned against it, heart thudding hard enough to feel in my throat. Outside, the rain softened, but the thunder stayed, distant and slow, like it was waiting for the right moment to return. The next morning, the air felt cleaner, lighter, like the world had been rinsed overnight. Drops of rain still clung to the hedges between our houses, shining like small secrets in the sunlight. Mark was gone again before dawn, leaving a note on the counter, "Be back late. Don't wait for dinner." He didn't have to write that anymore. I never did. By midday, the quiet became unbearable. Every sound, the clock, the fridge hum, the soft creak of the floorboards, felt louder without his voice to fill the gaps. I looked out the window and saw Daniel on his patio, shirt sleeves rolled, cleaning up the storm's mess. He glanced up, saw me watching, and smiled. That easy, familiar smile that said I know. A few minutes later, he was at the fence again. "Sun's finally back," he said. "Yeah," I answered. "Everything feels lighter." He tilted his head. "Want to come see the damage?" I could use a second opinion. I didn't hesitate this time. Inside his house, it smelled like cedar and fresh coffee. The same mug sat on the counter, the one he always used. The floor creaked beneath my bare feet as I followed him to the patio. The boards were damp, glistening in the light, and his tools lay scattered like the aftermath of a storm that wasn't entirely outside. He was standing close when he said, "Funny how quiet it gets after rain. Like the world's holding its breath." I nodded, but my eyes were on his hands, calloused, steady, resting on the wooden railing between us. "Do you ever feel like you're just waiting for something to happen?" I asked. He looked at me then, really looked, and the space between us vanished. He reached up, brushing his thumb lightly along my jaw. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't even a question. His hand moved slowly, like he was memorizing a map he wasn't supposed to touch. I should have pulled away. I didn't. When he leaned in, I could feel his breath before his lips met mine. The first kiss was tentative, cautious, almost reverent, but it broke something inside me I didn't know was still fragile. My hands found his chest, warm beneath the fabric, heartbeat wild and certain. The second kiss wasn't careful. He pulled me closer, the railing pressing against my back, and the world outside blurred, no wind, no sound, only the rhythm of two people who had already crossed the line long before this moment. When we finally stopped, the air between us was thin, trembling. He whispered, "You can tell me to stop." I shook my head. "I don't want to." And I didn't. Later, I'd tell myself it was the quiet that made it happen, the stillness after the storm, the loneliness echoing between two houses that looked the same but weren't. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was only his hand on my waist, the faint taste of coffee, and the terrifying calm of finally doing what I'd already imagined 100 times. We never made a plan. It just continued, the way breathing does when you stop thinking about it. That afternoon melted into something wordless. After the kiss, neither of us spoke. Daniel's thumb traced the edge of my sleeve, his eyes searching mine, waiting for some sign of regret. But there wasn't any. Only a strange calm that came with finally giving in. "Come inside," he said softly. It wasn't a question. His house was quiet except for the steady hum of rain still dripping from the eaves. The curtains swayed with every soft gust through the open door. The world outside seemed far away, like we had slipped into a slower place where time moved differently. He poured 2 cups of coffee, hands slightly trembling, and placed one in front of me. I didn't drink it. Neither did he. When I looked up, he was already watching me, not in the way strangers do, but like someone who's memorized every detail and still can't look away. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I know. But you're not leaving." "I know," I whispered again. He stepped closer, slow enough that I could have stopped him, but I didn't. His hand found the small of my back, drawing me in until I could feel his heartbeat against mine. There was no more hesitation. When his lips met mine again, everything around us disappeared, the ticking clock, the patter of rain, the entire careful world we'd built to hide behind. We moved together as if pulled by something older than reason. The couch behind us caught the edge of my knee, and we sank into it, laughing quietly at the clumsiness, the absurdity of still pretending this was fragile. It wasn't. It was inevitable. Every touch felt both new and familiar, his fingers tracing my collarbone, the warmth of his breath against my neck, the sound I made when he whispered my name like he'd been waiting years to say it. There were no promises, no words like love or forever, just the honesty of 2 people too tired of pretending not to need someone. Later, when the world crept back in, the rain easing, the light shifting, we lay there, motionless, barely touching. I could hear his heartbeat slow under my cheek. For the first time in months, my body felt still, not restless. Not lonely. When I finally stood, his hand brushed mine, a quiet question without words. "I should go," I said. "I know." He walked me to the door, the space between us humming with what we'd done. I stepped out into the pale light, the grass wet beneath my feet, and glanced back once. He was still standing there, a silhouette framed by the open door. The world looked exactly the same. But it wasn't. The next morning felt too bright, the kind of light that exposes everything you wish could stay hidden. The houses looked the same, lawns trimmed, curtains drawn, the world still pretending to be ordinary. But I wasn't. I woke to the sound of Mark's car pulling into the driveway. For a second, I forgot he existed, and that realization hit harder than guilt ever could. I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection calm, composed, hair tied back like I had done nothing at all. But my body still remembered. Every place Daniel's hands had touched felt like it belonged to someone else now. Mark came in with his usual distracted smile, phone still in hand, a half-spoken greeting already fading as he walked past me. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," I said. "You?" He nodded, didn't look up. His lips brushed my cheek out of habit, and I felt nothing. The day unfolded in slow motion, laundry, dishes, small talk that meant less than silence. My mind replayed the sound of rain against Daniel's windows, the way his voice had trembled when he said my name, the way the world had gone completely still. By afternoon, I found myself at the kitchen window again. His curtains were open. He was sitting at the table, staring at something I couldn't see. For a moment, I thought he'd look up, but he didn't. He just sat there, fingers tapping lightly on his mug, lost in the same kind of quiet I was drowning in. That evening, Mark mentioned dinner plans with friends, a night out I was expected to join. I said I wasn't feeling well. He didn't question it. He just nodded, already halfway back into his emails. When the door closed behind him, the house fell silent. The hum through the hedge started again, Daniel's coffee machine, even though it was night. A strange, low comfort in the air between us. I stepped onto the porch, barefoot, the boards cool under my feet. Through the small gap in the fence, I could see him, sitting outside, head tilted toward the sky, the faint glow from his kitchen spilling onto his arm. He didn't notice me. Or maybe he did and just didn't move. For a long moment, I stood there, breathing in the stillness between us. There was no need for words, no need for more. It wasn't over. It wasn't beginning again either. It simply was. Two houses, side by side. Two people pretending the world hadn't shifted. And in the space between, a silence that felt almost like peace. The next few days passed quietly, almost too quietly. No knocks, no messages, no excuses to cross the fence. Just the hum of daily life pretending nothing had changed. I saw Daniel once, late afternoon, carrying groceries to his door. Our eyes met for a second. He smiled, small, tired, the kind of smile that says I remember, but I won't say it. I smiled back. That was enough. At night, when Mark talked about work or plans for the weekend, I nodded at the right moments but didn't hear a word. My thoughts lived next door, in the scent of coffee, in the echo of a voice that had said my name like it mattered. The world went on. But underneath the calm, I could still feel it, that quiet pulse between our houses, steady and alive, waiting for something neither of us dared to reach for again. Weeks later, everything looked normal again. The lawns trimmed, the mail collected, polite smiles exchanged across the drive. Mark talked about repainting the kitchen, and I nodded, pretending to listen. But sometimes, in the quiet mornings, I still caught it, that familiar hum through the hedge. The sound that started it all. I'd pause with my mug halfway to my lips, eyes closing for just a second, letting the memory settle. Not guilt. Not regret. Just a quiet recognition of something that had lived between us, brief, forbidden, real. Daniel still made his coffee early. I still listened. We didn't wave anymore. We didn't need to. Some stories don't end with a confession or a consequence. Some just fade into the spaces between two houses. Where silence remembers everything. And nobody says a word.